Big move for the Steelers. I'm excited about this one. I'm usually the pessimist on the pod, but I Michael Pittman in general, I think is a great fit with DK. The player himself, I think you put him at the Z off the ball outside receiver. You move him around. I think he's a nice fit with DK. I think he can really. I think DK can be a better receiver for having a guy like Pittman on the roster.
Welcome back to episode 10 of Out of Town Yinzers. I'm Joe alongside Justin. We're talking Steelers, Pirates, Pens, and Pitt. So crack a beer, sip a latte. We're going to jump right into it. And today it's all about free agency.
Yeah, we have plenty to talk about with the Steelers tonight. A lot of fun stuff to talk about, some stuff to go over. So just to start, if we want to run through some of the stuff just happened literally before we jumped on, so timing is perfect for us this week. But just a quick run through. Biggest thing that happened, obviously the Pittman trade with the Colts. From there, they did sign Asante Samuel, Jamal Dean. They did re-sign Holcomb, and then Dowdle was the other big signing. And then on the other end of things, Gainwell is gone, Pierre's gone, Sayamalu is gone. I don't know if I'm forgetting anyone there, but those are the big main pieces. So just to start, if we want to start with Pittman, that's the big news today, kind of the unexpected news. I did send a text in our group chat at exactly 12:04 as soon as the Pierce signing went down. Did not think that Alec Pierce was going to re-sign with the Colts, and I said the Steelers should be on the phone immediately with the Colts. Was my exact tweet or my exact text, and apparently they were because they made the deal. What are your thoughts just in general on the Pittman trade? What it means for the Steelers?
Yeah, they're a better team today than they were yesterday for sure. I think the Steelers were a team where it was pretty obvious where their holes were going into this offseason. Cornerback, running back being them, but wide receiver was the most glaring throughout the season last year. Only having Metcalf out there, having Gainwell leading your team in catches, that's not the place you want to be as a franchise. So, you guys, there's a lot of arguing. Is Pittman the right complementary to Metcalf and things of that nature? But he's damn sure better than Calvin Austin. So, definitely something to be excited about today.
Yeah, so the player itself, I don't even really understand why people would be saying that. I think he's I guess in theory, if you're trying to slot in the perfect like compliment, you're getting way too specific if you're getting that in depth. But I think he's a great move Z receiver. You got Metcalf at the X. He's a good compliment. He actually in some ways they're different, certainly different players. Um, but there's some similarities between what Pickens would have been in the offense last year if they kept him versus Pittman. Now, very different age. Oh, absolutely. He's a move Z receiver that can be off the line, and he's more intermediate than he is deep ball. But there are some similarities in terms of you have another outside receiver that's going to fit well with Metcalf. I don't even know what the argument would be. You have another guy that can win outside the numbers, great route runner, great intermediate receiver. I'm not saying he's Pickens, but they found another guy that can win outside the numbers, can win. He could be a big slot. Like they could play him at big slot, but they just got plenty of options, plenty of things to play with now. And to your point, this is the one of the bigger glaring needs of any team in the NFL was the Steelers and receiver too. I mean, they didn't even have an X or anyone to play. They were playing MVS. They basically just picked up MVS and were slotting him in. Let alone the fact that they didn't even have a second guy to win outside the numbers while DK wasn't off the field. So just couldn't be any more of an obvious need. The numbers look good. A $19 million cap hit. There's no issue. You see Alec Pierce signing for the money he's signing for right now. The cap hit actually went down for Pittman going to the Steelers. So his numbers last 2 years. Again, this is the piece that does need to be talked about. So the other side of it, you could make an argument both ways for hey, which way is his career headed? Last 2 years, almost identical numbers, right around 800 yards receiving. Overall, 25, he had the back injury. He was very clearly playing through. I'm sorry, 24. He very clearly was playing through some injuries. Last year, Now his numbers would have been, they were projecting for better before Daniel Jones got hurt, and they ended up with Philip Rivers, but still very similar. 800-ish yards, 80 receptions. He had 7 touchdowns. So clearly, with a better offense, you're in the red zone more. He was targeted more. I think that's what you could see more as like an upside. And the 2 years prior to that, he was right at 1,000-yard receiver, 95 to 100 catches. Really the 3 years prior to that. So again, is he on his way down going into his 29th-year-old season? Maybe a little bit. I mean, you could talk me into the negative in terms of where he's at his career, but could not be a bigger upgrade, for free. I mean, in reality, they basically got one of the biggest upgrades
Well,
you could
20
get at
million.
a receiver position in the NFL for free, essentially.
Well, 20 million was the price. So that's
No, I
not
mean
free.
the return, what they had to give up.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
for sure.
a
Yeah, I
late
think it
round
was just
flip
the
is
Colts
an
couldn't
insignificant.
have that in their roster, paying those receivers the same way. But I feel like Pittman is one that he's definitely an upgrade, but the bar was so low. So I
Well,
think, it's it's happy to have someone because I really don't know why they didn't do that last year of some caliber that was better than what they
right.
did. So it's nice to have Pittman. I hope that this isn't the end for the wide receiver room. I hope it's still addressed early in the NFL draft. They need some more talent there, and not just talent that's nearing 30 and you know
Right.
has back issues and things along those
Right.
lines. I'm telling you, your back does not feel better in your 30s than it does in your 20s. That's a for sure thing.
No, no.
And Pittman is someone that again can do exactly what you're saying, kind of get open but he's not a yak guy. He's not going to break a game open in that sense. So he's really just going to be someone that's going to be a solid player for you going forward. So my hope is that he's more of what we want him to be there and not like an Allen Robinson perspective, that the Rams did. I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
that would be the danger side on the low end. But
right.
um, so I think TLDR, my summary on Michael Pittman is that he's better than what they had, but they could have done better than a Michael Pittman for a wide receiver too, as well, is what I would think.
Well, as usual, you're just too negative with the Steelers, Joe. That's what it
Yeah.
is. I'm a little bit more optimistic, I think, for the first time on a move they've made. Again, I unfortunately for him, he had 100-yard game last year. It was against the Steelers, so he doesn't get to play the Steelers anymore. But I'm a little bit more optimistic. I think there's some upside here that I do like. And again, I agree with you. They should have made a move like this last year, but in terms of what they had to give up, I mean, you weren't gonna get any better value in terms of a move at really any position than you were in this move. And in a lot of ways, they made a similar move to what we were talking about in hockey last week in terms of they took advantage of the team that was up against the cap, and that's where the value came from.
Yeah, I agree. And outside of even just Pittman, it was nice to see them addressing their other holes early, quickly too. And that's, it's kind of just fun in the NFL that way, especially we talk about parity. This is kind of what you mean in the NFL. All the teams were signing players today across the board. The Steelers, I think, signed players that made sense for their roster. So to go after Jamel Dean as well. So now you got Porter, Dean, you have Samuel back. You have Elliott and Ramsey. You have a secondary now of 5 players that you can feel comfortable in. The defensive line you're comfortable in. Overflowing talent at edge, like we were talking about. I think middle linebacker is probably the one place where you could probably add a body. And there's some good players in the draft. I like a Jacob Rodriguez from Texas Tech. Maybe a Pitt player could slide in there as well. But on the offensive side, to get a Pittman and a Dowdle, you're kind of filling in the holes. So now you're really just looking. I think free agency that they'll add from here is, an offensive lineman somewhere on the left side with Sayamalu gone, so probably a guard, but could draft in that space as well. And then obviously, still one opening at a kind of important position that's still out there as well. So
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, the Dean signing, I think this is where we're at. The age on some of these guys, you're touching on with Pittman, corners don't normally get better into their 30s, but this is where we're at right now in terms of they're trying to fill needs. I do like the fact that these signings on defense free them up completely to, I was starting to get worried they might take a safety in the first round, which I have a lot of issues with that in general. They were right in that window where I think a lot of safeties are getting projected out. I actually saw them taking a safety in a mock the other day. But I think this now makes it so that they don't feel like they need to reach. Again, regardless of if you think their window is now or not, you probably want them to be prioritizing certain positions. I think we certainly agree on that. I think they, in day one of tampering or, of free agency, I think they've set themselves up to where they don't have to feel tied to certain positions or certain position needs, which is really, it's pretty important in the NFL. So jumping right from the Steelers, the middle of the offseason, right into the Penguins in the thick of it. Big, kind of an up and down week for the Penguins in general, but what a way to finish
Big
with the
up
game in
week,
Boston.
big ending of the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, started with the two losses since we last talked. They started with a tough loss in Boston and ended with a big win against Boston. But yeah, I that was the biggest win of the season. I don't know if there's really a close second. That was the biggest win, biggest period. That felt like I think I texted you right after the game. That felt like more than 2 points. It felt like they won 4 points in that game, just because of the what they're heading into on the road, what they're coming out of. That 2 points just felt enormous on Sunday.
Well, and because you already wrote it off too. When you're in
I,
the middle of a game and you say, "Hey, like
yep.
you're already in your mind saying, "Hey, we lost these 2 points and now we're going to have to go on the road. We already know that March was going to be hard. We're starting off on a bad foot. We lost a shootout again the night before. So get 1 point and then now we're going to lose it and then to come all the way back. It's just when you have the range of emotions like that in one game is what makes those things stick out because it feels like you truly had wrote off those 2 points and now you can kind of write them in, and that's exactly the right time that the Pens needed it. I think it's just amazing that when you talk about the NHL season, it's so long. You can play such good hockey for so long that the Penguins have. They had, at some points, kind of over 90% chance to make the playoffs. I still think they're likely to make the playoffs, but we're talking about an early March game against the Bruins saying, "Hey, are you gonna like this is a playoff deciding type game?" So it just kind of shows you how tight NHL is now. I think kind of the overtime scoring and things like that keeps it tighter too. But there's some teams behind the Penguins that they got to stay on it now over the next few games, and that's really just to make it to the dance.
Yeah, Columbus is all of a sudden it might be come down to the Penguins in Columbus to get into the playoffs, which is, sounds crazy after where they came from a week or two ago. But you mentioned overtime. It felt like it felt even better because they actually won a game in overtime. And I know they've been decent, 4-on-4 or 3-on-3, in overtime, but just it almost felt like they needed to win a game in overtime just to feel like it was possible, especially going into this stretch that they have. Big point too or big thing to point out. Chinikov and Mantha both came up huge. Those are two deals, two guys they acquired between this time or between now and last offseason. So again, two guys coming up big. Dewar had
Holding on to
another
Mantha too
nice game
through
in
the
general.
the deadline, I think was a big thing. Like Mantha was someone that they could potentially have moved on from, but
I
hanging on
never
to.
really understood that. I saw that a lot. I never really understood that. Skinner, I could have seen that could have made some sense. I never really understood the talk with Mantha. I mean, he's been great for them this year. I don't know why they would have, if you flip this and maybe they're 10 points behind, for sure it would have made sense. But he's been great for them, so I never really got that. But I saw the same thing. I was seeing Mantha come up, just didn't really make a ton of sense to me. But yeah, he came up big again. Great game, great third period against the Bruins. So it's just nice seeing those names, especially with Crosby and Malkin out, to see some of the names. You make moves and then they come up big for you, like those two did.
Yeah, Chinakov's effort in overtime was unreal. And honestly, that's the thing that got him hammered in Columbus was his effort. And that has not been an issue in Pittsburgh. He's been
No,
full bore. So really that kind of rolling aspect. And, when you're in this phase where you're just trying to float until Crosby comes back, until you really get that top end scorer again, you need that effort and those points from a Mantha and from a Chinikov more than ever.
yeah, Carlson was great too. in their absence. Yeah, like you said, he's really been that piece they hadn't had the last couple years, a scorer that when one of those two's out can really step up. And yeah, that you could argue that was one of the best. I mean, I think you would argue that's one of the best trades that was made this year, for sure.
Yeah, quiet deadline, but when you already make your big move early, it doesn't really
Right,
matter.
right.
So what's up next for the next 5 games? Let's break it down and what's your expectation for a good road trip here?
Yeah, so really, if you look at the next 8 in general, they play Carolina and Colorado 5 of the next 8 games. So I really do think it really starts with the 5 game road trip. This is going to determine what their season looks like. If they need to be 500 in this road trip in terms of points just to, hang on. Anything better than that, I think they're going to be a playoff team. It gets real dicey if you're at that or below that. One thing to look at too, I had written, I'd noted the faceoffs here. They played Boston. They were 33% on the draw, and then they were 50% last night. Look for, I think, not that faceoffs are a little bit overblown sometimes, but right now when you're in the low 30s, that becomes a real issue. And if you notice, the numbers line up very they were terrible against the Rangers, but they line up directly with when they're home and when they're on the road, and that's that last draw. So that'll be big. It'll be big to see just in general they can overcome that because that has been an issue in general. It's certainly been an issue on the road without Crosby. So this road trip, there's a possibility that Crosby could come back on this road trip. Not sure that's going to happen, but they just need to be respectable on the draw in these games because you could literally lose a game as bad as they've been on the draw.
Yeah, and I would love to see them just get a couple early because you can fade late on a road trip. So if they can just kind of,
Right.
like you said, kind of 5 points is that bogey. If they could get 2 wins of the first 3 games, and then just steal a couple from there, that's what allows Crosby to take a little bit more time. It's more late March till he gets in the lineup and kind of get fresh. But anytime if at some point in this road trip it looks like the Pens are going the opposite direction and they're losing a little bit too much ground and CBJ keeps winning, things of that nature, you could see Crosby jump in the lineup before they come back home.
Yeah. Again, all the reports are saying he looks great. He looks like he's moving like normal. So we'll see. I think I wouldn't be surprised. I might even bet at this point that he's going to be back before those initial reports. So they may need it. To your point, and even if they don't, I think he's going to be back sooner than expected. With Malkin, Malkin will be coming back in the middle of this road trip, but they need Crosby's far and away, especially with him as a center. Malkin plays a lot more wing at this point, so they're going to need him just in general. Especially Colorado and Carolina; those are fast teams. Those are good teams. They're going to need him back sooner rather than later.
Just give us the NHL playoffs. There's nothing like a little run.
Yeah.
We didn't get that last year. It just feels, we need that time to just kind of to see that. That's really when you rally around the team more than anything. So just make it there, Pens. Come on, just a few wins here on this road trip and
That
keep
was
going.
that was the goal going into this year. I didn't expect them to be. I figured they'd be more in like the Columbus, situation where they're really pushing to try to get in, not in a driver's seat. So you could not ask for more than where they're at right now. Just this last little push. If they can get through these next 3 weeks, I think well, really 2 weeks, they're set. All right, so jumping into the Pirates. This week we wanted to go over maybe some of the names we haven't talked about as much. We focused certainly on some of the up and coming and the exciting players, top end players. We're going to go over players that we think might overperform and or break out. So Joe, if you want to start with your pick here.
Yeah, I think from a Pirates standpoint, there's one player that really could round out their rotation and make a huge impact, and that's Braxton Ashcraft. Ashcraft is someone that's 26. This is going to be his first full year in the bigs. So his success, I think, is really going to be about how many innings he can actually get in. If he can get in somewhere around 150 to 170 innings, the higher side, the better. It's going to be hard for him to get there with his history. He hasn't had the injury history that allow him to build up those innings over time, but his stuff is legit. He's looked great in spring. Already got Skeens at the top. You know what Keller is. He's probably not really a two. He's probably more of a three. And then if you can have Braxton Ashcraft and Jared Jones and then Bubba Chandler can kind of round it out, that it's such a big rotation in terms of the velocity, things of that nature. It's just a lot of fun. But he's someone that I don't think people are counting on. But if I had to kind of put odds on who's going to have a better season statistically, my money would be on Ashcraft over Bubba Chandler, and I think he has
Wow.
that kind of
Okay.
the ceiling as well. So that's where I would say is at the end of the season, if he can get over 150 innings, we're going to be talking about Ashcraft as someone that's a staple in the Pirates rotation going forward.
Okay. Well, that's more of an exciting pick than mine. Mine's pretty boring. Mine's but I think it's the right pick. So I'm gonna go Jake Mangum. Now, not only is this pick probably boring, but he was more or less just, let's be honest, he was a throw in the trade, at the end of the day. So, but so far he's had a nice spring. I think he's going to start or he'll certainly play in more games than people realize. I think he might end up starting more games, whether that's through injury, whether that's through him just them needing a little bit more stability in the outfield. I just think he's going to play more. So this is more of a pick on upside in general. I think in terms of the expectations, I don't think there's much of an expectation in general with him. I think in general, this is going to be the answer, Kelly's answer for how do we make the defense work? How do we make this outfield work? He's going to be in, if the Pirates are going to win a bunch of games, he's certainly going to be in them at the end. In general, I think he's just going to appear in way more games than people think. And to me, I think that's the perfect setup for a player that's going to overperform expectations. So, like what I've seen so far, both in the field, he's hitting well in the spring down in Bradenton. So I'm going to go more boring, but I think it could be more impactful. I think than people think with Jake Mangum. It's nice to see them have some depth in the outfield for the first time in a while as well. So I think it'll be a nice surprise for the Pirates, under the radar surprise.
Yeah, I think Jocelyn Garcia would probably be a little bit more exciting than Mangum. Mangum
Yeah,
is definitely
yeah,
someone that he's going to play his role, and I think he's going to play his role well. He also is almost 30, and this is only his second year in the
right.
baseball, so his
Yeah,
ceiling is pretty low. But if again he's kind of in that aspect, I think the thing from a fan standpoint, he's going to be fun to root for. He's going to do the little things that you look for. He's never going to, walk to first base when he grounds out to short, do those type of things. He's going to be fun to root for. I'm actually just more excited to see Mangum as a roommate for Connor Griffin on the road. I think that's the bigger role that he could play for the Pirates long term, and maybe why he's on the
yeah.
team. I said that before,
Right.
but that relationship is real. So maybe that's just my hedge to be able to talk about Connor Griffin every episode. But
All
here it is. I
right.
think Mangum
We
is going to be
almost
more
got
important
through
than
the
Griffin.
segment without talking to him. I literally had it written down. Could Joe do it this week? Maybe next week. Maybe
Maybe
next
next week.
week.
Probably not.
So same as with Joe and the Pirates, never being able to not talk, about some up and coming players. The Pitt were on the other end of the spectrum. I don't think we can be even. I think we've been positive, thanks to Larry Fitzgerald, one time on this podcast about Pitt. So not our fault. Not much to be positive about, especially with Pitt basketball. So the news this week is will they or won't they with the Capel buyout? Starting to be more and more rumors that they will be buying him out. Just to dive right into the stats, not that we haven't touched on these things before, but now that we're essentially at a full season, barring them going on some type of miracle run in the ACC tournament, will not happen. But in the 8 years that Capel's been with the program, they're almost exactly 500 at this point. That is not easy to do at a Power Four school. One, to make it 8 years at 500, but just in general, when you get so many cupcakes out of conference, it is hard to be 500 at a Power Four school, let alone last that long. They're 60 and 92 in the ACC. That is horrible.
That's the record you want to be
This is
500 is the ACC record.
exactly 500 in the ACC would be coming out of Stallings would have been perfectly acceptable, would have been perfectly fine. His tenure there has really been, a build up to the middle years and then just, stairs right back down to where they started under Stallings. 3 of the 8 worst seasons in Pitt basketball history have happened under Capel. That
Mm.
sounds crazy. If you would have told me that 3 years ago, I never would have believed that. Just the way I thought they were, I thought the trajectory was going. Yeah, 3 18 plus
Pitt
lost
basketball was
seasons
not good in
is
the
not easy
90s
to do.
either. So that was That is not a
Yeah, they weren't. No, they weren't great. I mean, the beginning of the '90s, they were very good, and they kind of, they were. There was a rebuild in the middle of the '90s for sure. Yeah, but yeah, it's not like there's some incredible, there's some incredible basketball history to where, 3 of 8 seasons is. I mean, that's wild to see that, to hear that stat. Um, I think Pete said that stat this week, but yeah, 3 of their 8 worst seasons, most losses is just an incredible stat. It's also just as great. I think he's 51, and he's been a head coach, I think 17 seasons at this point was the stat there. That's kind of crazy too. There's just so many. I think that really those things go hand in hand in that Capel is very likable. I like Capel. I think people like him in general. He's a great guy. You talk to him, you're like, this is the guy. I have friends that thought it was an incredible hire. They weren't even Pitt fans the time they hired him, but just one thing after another in basketball, 1 or 2 breaks can really change things. And had a couple weird breaks with players, and in the middle of his tenure, but yeah, it just has not worked out at all. My biggest concern here is just the money in general. I think that's the big story. But what's your take in general on where they're at with Capel now?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone can understand, get rid of Capel at this point. He hasn't won enough. I think that's just when you look at 60 and 92 in the ACC, like that's just writing on the wall. When you think about it, that's not what Pitt should aspire to and shouldn't be acceptable when it is from a long-term standpoint. So, uh, be it this year or be it, at the end of the contract, Capel should move on. What's crazy though is the money, because really the money I think is what's held back Pitt basketball from really being good in this era in general too. I don't know if they have enough money in that roster. So when you think about Capel, I don't know, is the buyout the whole aspect? Would you know what the buyout number is for Capel?
Yeah, they're saying I've heard anywhere from 9 to 12 is what it's looking at, or what it's looking like. They are, again, this recruiting class. You could argue they're putting the money into the roster the wrong way, but it does seem like from everything I've read and heard, they are starting to. I don't want to say invest in the team, but they are. You look at this recruit. It is a great recruiting class. That is, of course, it happens right now. This recruiting class couldn't have come in a couple years ago, but I don't think you make that decision based on that, but it is more than that. Like, this is modern day athletics now. That buyout is real, and it's not. This is 10 years ago. There's no question. This buyout's happening, and I don't even think anyone. I mean, in general, Capel wouldn't be surprised. I think he's all more or less said it himself that he should essentially be fired. If he's not, it's clearly a money thing. So you could make the argument that they'd be better suited to take that money. Now, the problem is
Yes.
it's not a bucket. The problem is it's not necessarily one bucket where that 9 to 12 million they're getting for the buyout. If you don't make that move, those boosters may say, well, I'm not paying the money. So it's not as simple as saying it like that. But I do think, and I think you're apparently going to agree with me, they'd probably be better suited to take, if they could find a way to get whatever that number is, they take that and reinvest that into the team, they're going to be better off. And that's modern day coaching versus buyouts and all this stuff going. They're not a power school that just has some unlimited, bank account that they'll buy them out and they'll have the same team they would either way. That's not the reality. And I have a bigger concern here is this going to carry over into football? That's the reality for these mid-level Power 4 teams is, you know, can they afford to pay this and not have it, creep into football? And it may already be doing that a little bit. So that's my bigger concern. It's a little hard to say because we don't know the exact numbers. We don't know. We're not the ones making those decisions. But if I had to guess, I don't know that they're going to be better off by getting rid of him, knowing where does the money come from for the players then?
Oh yeah. I mean, college sports is more about the money than anything now. Even probably professional, the way it's kind of set up to be, and that's very true. I think too, and I think it can't be discounted. So I'm not going to discount this statement. But Pitt's big recruiting class this year, is it also because some of those big teams aren't recruiting high school kids anymore, and instead they're
Yes,
just
that's
recruiting other
yeah,
college players? I feel like that's kind of the
100%.
way college basketball is going too. And is that just a sense of they don't have as much money as some other teams too, so they're not going after experienced guys. They gotta bring in freshmen that come through too, and who knows if the freshmen even stay until their sophomore year. So it's not like you're bringing in this recruiting class that's gonna stick and play for your team. So it's one of those things that for Pitt basketball, they really they really just need, even from a fan perspective, just a breath of fresh air. So money aside, I think Capel is just someone that really has just become stale for all the right reasons, and it's time to move on. And I think the biggest thing when you move on from Capel, and like you said, it's not the same bucket, so I think they can move on and still, salvage a team and buy a team a little bit for this year. But at the same time, if you can get that a coach that's more of that up and coming coach, I think the Pitt has always, these last two times, Stallings and Capel have been that retread Power Five type coach. That's not what Pitt needs, I think, right now. I think they need someone who's going to come in and kind of try to change that culture of the team. And really, it's not going to be my money paying for it. So go ahead and throw an extra, a few money to have
Right.
Cable go. But, if you're pie in the sky, the roster is what wins games, not the coach in college basketball, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you from like a theoretical standpoint with college sports right now. It's just the reality. Until they start getting, and maybe they won't, we don't know, we don't have a crystal ball, but until they start getting contracts where both the player and the team and they're more than a year, and like that's why you're seeing even in football. Look at Indiana. Like they didn't build through recruiting classes, they built through the portal. Um, really, they I think they figured out the loophole before a lot of teams did. Miami's essentially been the same way. Not that they're not recruiting well, but in general, that's what teams are doing now. They're going, watch, why would I? Yeah, and you're starting to see it. Like, you got teams like West Virginia, completely outbidding, Power Four teams for recruits out of high school. And then those teams are just going, okay, yeah, that's fine. We're just going to turn around and spend the money on the portal. And that's exactly what they're doing. So,
Yeah, better days to come for Pitt basketball, but I don't know if they're going to be coming with Jeff Capel, I think is the end of the story.
yeah.
We're going to end today's episode with the draft. Today's draft is going to be Steelers related. We're going to do skill players since the year 2000. So that would be running backs, wide receivers, tight ends for the Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger does not count. 4 picks a team. We decided before we started here that Justin's going to have the first pick. I'll do the next two and the wraparound and we'll come through. So, Justin, I feel like the number one overall pick is pretty obvious. And who's the best player? Not the best human, but maybe the best player.
And just a reminder too to vote in the we'll have it listed on the poll section. Vote in the comments. Tell us where we went wrong. I'm sure Joe will have a lot to say about my pick. So tell us where we went wrong and tell us who won, whether in the comments or in the poll. So first pick, obvious one, Antonio Brown. Got to go with Antonio Brown here.
And I think the wraparound are two Steelers staples when it comes down to it. You can see their face and their smiles for a second, and they'll light up the room. Jerome Bettis and Hines Ward. I feel like Jerome Bettis overlapped that 2000, so a couple of his really good years for the Steelers were probably right at the end of the 90s. Probably not the full career when you kind of have that cutoff, but Hines Ward certainly was, and they were both tremendous Steelers, Super Bowl winning Steelers. Uh, Bettis,
Yeah, I
Ward.
mean, yeah, in general, those are Bettis, and he's had enough of his career in the 2000s. That definitely counts. Those are two good picks. So I think here I'm going to go. I'm going to go Santonio Holmes here, Joe. I think you just got to go Santonio Holmes, Super Bowl MVP. I think that's the pick here. That's an easy pick. So I go back to back. I think I'm going to well, I'll take Willie Parker. Just, double up on, well, I guess Santonio Holmes they're both Super Bowl related. You just got to go with those two here as my second and third picks.
Yeah, no, that was good. You definitely stole Antonio Holmes from me, 100%. That was someone that I was going to come back around on. He's
Yeah, I just
behind
had a
me.
feeling. Yeah.
It's the best catch that you kind of ever see. So I'm going to go wide receiver Plexico Burris as the next person there. I feel like if he would have stayed an extra contract, we kind of would be talking a lot differently in the career history of Plexico. But he certainly was kind of a freak. The ups and downs, his downs started with that, you know, spike the ball and fumble on your own to,
Yeah,
I remember him
Jacksonville.
winning some games in overtime. So definitely some good moments from Plexico. And I feel like rounding out the team, it's just there hasn't been too many good skill players recently. So you want to go someone that's a little bit more recent, but it's kind of slim pickings there. We're gonna go Le'Veon Bell to wrap it out as well. So even though he didn't have that second contract, I'm gonna go Le'Veon. So
I get it. Clearly, I'm going character here. We're really worried about that in our draft here. I also think you needed to take Plexico because you only one of us dressed up as him for Halloween, so that was a good pick on your part. It was fitting. Yeah, you threw me off there. I didn't see the Le'Veon Bell pick coming from you. That was a good pick. So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with a well-rounded team, like you in the movie draft. I'm gonna actually take a tight end since I value the position. So I'm gonna go Heath Miller here. I
he's the
think
only
that's
one you could
a
possibly talk about.
oh yeah, for sure. So I think that's a solid pick.
You know, just doing that draft and looking through those 8 players, the Steelers have not had that good of skill players since the year 2000. I feel like if we did some other teams, that you could probably fill out those 8 spots a lot easier than it was for the
Yeah,
Steelers.
I think a lot of that is because of the defenses. Their defensive drafts would be right up there since the 2000s. So that's probably a big part of it. We forgot Mike Wallace was we didn't
That
he
was an
probably could have
honorable
been
mention. I was gonna
mentioned.
say, yeah, DK I think could be mentioned.
Yeah.
It's only one
It's kind
year
of
in.
hard because he's only played 1 year. It's hard to, how do you take 1 year versus like careers or half a career with some of these guys? But yeah, he would have been on there too.
All right. Well, if you guys are still listening, we appreciate you. Come back next Wednesday for another episode.
All right, see you later.